Now it says live stream, so are we on now?
Yep, you're all set.
Okay, sorry. All right, so if anyone's joining on the live stream, we apologize. We do not have quorum, so we're unable to take actions as a committee today or any votes, but we can just kind of um, give a brief update on things that are going on, and we'll attempt to have another meeting shortly. Um, we have we already have two subcommittees formed. Those are now going to begin meeting separately, a visioning committee and a funding committee. We've just sort of discussed before we went live, who's on those committees. So those will be, we're going to be doing some of our discussions and work, particularly on the visioning committee, going forward through subcommittees, and then anything that needs a formal, a broader advisory committee vote would come before the full committee. I guess the big update, the legislative session ended last week without any confirmation of the governor's nominee for ombuds. As I understand it, this was reported in the press, and I've heard as well that there was an agreement reached between the governor's office and the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, under which Ms. Carpenter, the governor's nominee, would not be appointed as a recess appointment. I think there's some question about whether the statute permitted that. So they've essentially, as I understand it, agreed that she wouldn't be made as a recess appointment, and they had intended, I guess, to amend the statute to permit an interim ombuds appointment in July that would be made by the governor with consent or with advice of the Black and, I think it's Black and Puerto Rican, right? Not Black and Hispanic, Black and Puerto Rican caucus. And then the advisory committee, we would start the formal application process again in September, and submit a new slate of nominees to the governor in December. As I understand it, that it didn't happen in terms of an amendment to the statute, but there is still that sort of working agreement. And I guess they will amend the statute at some point. I don't exactly know what that means for us. I think if there's an appointment, I suppose the legislation does permit the governor to make a appointment when the legislature is not in session, although I don't know if he can do it without a list. In any event, I think there were a number of folks on the committee and in the community who, at least felt that this was, not the worst potential outcome. I think we discussed that there seemed to be a little bit of a sort of trust deficit with the nominee and the impacted community, such that I think a lot of folks, certainly in the community and certainly at least some on the committee as well, felt that maybe the governor's nominee wouldn't succeed, potentially, given that deficit. So I think under the circumstances, perhaps it's not the best outcome, not the worst outcome. We, as a committee, I guess we should just be prepared to restart this process, assuming the statute is amended, or I suppose even if it's not, if we just went back to the drawing board, we should be ready to kind of post a position again in September or whenever the earliest opportunity we're able to, after based on the legislation or the agreement that's been reached, and just try to really move through it quickly. It was a long process, which was a shame, obviously, but we have a little bit of lead time, and perhaps we can do an even better job this time around of soliciting applicants. Ben, I see your hand raised. Sorry, I didn't see it initially because there was a little bar
No,
blocking it.
yeah, no worries. I just had a couple clarifying questions. So the as you said, I mean, I agree. Our understanding was the interpretation of the statute was it was vague that if appointment was made during session and then not acted on, sort of what happened to that nominee. Do we just assume that like now that the sessions end, there is no nominee? Like if I fact Miss Carpenter didn't have to like take back her nomination, it ended, right? Is that our understanding?
That's my understanding, although I think it's based on a sort of,
Okay,
gentlemen's and gentlewomen's agreement. I don't know that there's anything.
sure. I mean, I guess I would, with that in mind, and obviously we can't take an action as the full committee because we don't have a quorum, but it would be good to get clarification just as we like start moving forward with official business of starting the process again, that like we have carte blanche to like start the process as if there was no nominee at this point.
Actually, that does remind me. I had a voice. I had a voicemail from someone in the governor's office that I noticed before the call, but I wasn't able to return the call. So um, I don't know if that was going to be
Okay.
providing any clarity, but yeah, I mean, there's no reason we can't reach out. I'll certainly return that call, and if we don't get the clarity from the governor's office, we can try from Senator Winfield or others.
Understood. I mean, and I guess, I mean, I would, I mean, again, this is obviously not official committee business. I mean, I appreciate that the reporting was that we have this timetable. Obviously, the timetable isn't in the statute, so I guess it's kind of up to us to follow through on that sort of
Yeah.
timeline. I would say, and I think most of the people would agree on this, that we would want to have a nominee for the next session. Obviously, it's a long session. So that gives us a little bit of, a little bit more time, but like, I think that timeline of having a nominee ready, or a slate of nominees, that is, for the next session, would be our goal.
I have to tell you that I think that I will speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for the entire committee or other people, but I'm not a big fan of this interim person because I'm thinking of the fact that the population itself is still going to be in for with what a Band-Aid person for the time being, who then, I'm thinking fiscally, how is this going to impact such a small budget as it is? We already have financial issues coming into this office with such a small budget. So now we then have this interim person who draws a salary, whatever that will be. Then we now have to go through this process again. And that will draw, again, more financial, more resources that, again, we're starting from a very small ability. So it's like, I'd like to understand how that benefits, the incarcerated population, because I would rather we were allowed to immediately go in and start a search rather than waiting, because I think an interim person really just seems to make us backpedal. And then what is it going to be that we go through the same process we went through before and wait, what, another 9 months, 10 months, a year before we get somebody in? And as you said, it's a long session.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems we can't get an ombuds in place by July. An interim ombuds would be in place by July. Um, I can see how that could be in some ways that I guess yeah that person is going to draw a salary, but I think my hope would be that whoever that interim is, recognizing that he or she likely is not, or like I guess I can't say likely, but it is intended as a sort of interim position. I would love that person to be focused on getting more funding. I mean that obviously opening up the gates and saying, yeah, we'd love to hear from the incarcerated community now, but there's going to be a new ombuds, and I kind of see it as my job. I would think if I was that person to try to set the stage for the first, formally appointed ombuds, whether that's going to be that same person applying again or for some other person. So I see some benefit to it. I do also think I don't think it should take 9 months or a year. I think, like Ben said, we need to get clarity on when we can start, and I think we should start as soon as we can. And if there's nothing preventing us from starting before September, let's start before September. But I think the idea here is that they seem to recognize that if the governor was not going to make this as a recess appointment, it would leave the population without anybody for, again, that much longer, another 6 months till December or whenever it is that he might actually get a nominee from us, whereas an interim will at least have somebody in place in the meantime. I mean, I assume that's the thinking.
But then can I also ask, doesn't this ambiguity with the legislative language that allows him, I thought that we were trying to prevent this loophole in the first place. And like now that even with this hammering out of new language, it's still the same problem that, it's like he's getting a double bite of the apple. And yet again, it leaves, us out. We're left holding the bag. We go through this process. We've gone through this process and it wasn't respected the first time. Here we are again. And our opinion and we're still not being respected in this aspect. We're being told to wait rather than it would be.
Well,
go ahead.
I see where you're coming from, but I think like probably from the governor's perspective, it's, hey, I had my nominee, I have the votes for my nominee, or I can just muscle it in as a recess appointment. So he probably, from his perspective, he's making a concession by not putting forward or forcing through his preferred nominee, I think is.
Yeah, that would be my understanding. I mean, like, well, there's things we can control and things we can't control. Assuming, I mean, I do think the outcome where Ms. Carpenter was not voted on, and under our interpretation of the statute, at least one possible interpretation of the statute is that kind of nomination disappears. On one hand, that puts the ball back in our court. Like, I would actually say that now it's past May 8th. We have free reign to like start the process now. We don't have to wait till September, right? And also, we could never control the process of an interim out of session appointment. Like, we had no power over that, and the governor always had the power over that. So I agree with Tig that it's partly a concession that Ms. Carpenter would not be named as the recess appointment, and then we had the power. But I 100% agree with you, like having someone in a role for 6 months, a role that doesn't exist, an office that doesn't exist, like what is that person going to do? Like it seems, I mean, I don't know. It seems like very much sort of saying like we're doing something without actually doing something.
I think to your, the point you made earlier, and just again, yeah, I do think we should look closely at how the existing statute reads and determine, when and whether I assume we can act, but when we can act. And I guess I think you're probably right that there's no reason under the existing statute that we would have to wait till September, but we still, we can't put anybody in place, I think, right? I don't think there's a way for the for the advisory committee to appoint the ombuds during any recess. So nor would that probably be appropriate. But but in terms of getting the ball rolling, since it did take quite a while, last time, I would want to start as soon as possible.
But to kind of, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was wondering if we could use this opportunity before we go out and post position again to ask for them to, fund the position at a higher level, or at least instead of including like a crazy broad salary range, kind of zero in on how much this person is going to make. Because people did ask me about what the likely salary would be. I passed questions through the chair. I think we could get more applicants, better applicants, stronger applicants if we could offer more money.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should use every opportunity to try to get more money for the position. And I do agree with you, Andrew, that there were probably people who didn't apply because it was so vague as to, there was just a really broad range and they weren't sure what they'd be, how they'd be compensated. I was thinking, we don't have enough folks to kind of make a decision on this, but we could maybe kick it around over email and if there was unanimous consent, we could do something on it. But like, we held off, deliberately, for better or worse. But we, made a decision that we weren't gonna, weigh in for or against Ms. Carpenter, at least as a committee. And we all were able to do so on our own. I think, to me, it might be potentially appropriate to make some sort of statement now saying like this, what's done is done, but a lot of you said you were uncomfortable with this, at least in the committee, because of the lack of funding, right? And now just because it's not this person, there's still that bigger problem. I mean, a number of the folks not in the executive nominations committee said, "Oh, I'm voting no, or I'm voting, or I'm abstaining to send a message about the funding of the office," and that problem still remains, even if it's not, Ms. Carpenter as the nominee. So, I wonder if, as a committee, we could say, "Hey, yeah, we're ready to get back to work. We'll do our part, but you got to." It's a hard job to fill if you only have $400,000 for this office. It's going to be hard to find the right people. Daryl, I see you're. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking too, like, since we were talking about subcommittees, maybe there's a subcommittee that looks at that overall, what the position, like the funding purposes, and like if we're going to be starting a new search for somebody, what does that look like? Like, what does that look like? Making sure that the salary is clear. There's not such a wide range, similar to what Andrew said, but also just like making sure all I's are dotted and T's are crossed for the next search. Like there's no gray areas. There's no, is there, like, thinking of a subcommittee to making sure that we cross those bridges? Like what's the process going to look like the next time around? Because even when we did it this time, I feel like, we got into this situation because there was so many ways to like shit that happened. Excuse me. I forgot where I was at. It's after 5 o'clock. That, stuff could happen, just making sure that, we're everything is like, when this process goes through, not only is it transparent, but it is that we've kind of like made sure that this is when people fill out for it, they know what they're getting into, they know how much money they're going to get. We also know that, I mean, it's clear we've had this conversation before we even went for applicants, and maybe we need to be talking to whoever it is that funds it, is it appropriations or whoever it is, or do we need that fundraising committee to make sure that we get at least $1 million on the table to make sure that this gets off the ground properly? Because when you underfund things, it's almost like you don't believe in the process anyway. It's kind of like a joke. You know what I mean? And I know that as an impacted person, I don't want to be a part of anything that's not real. If we're going to really put this out there, if we're really going to do this, we're going to do it the right way. Let's do it the right way. Make sure it's funded properly, and make sure whoever goes into that position is fully equipped with the tools that they're going to need, and not struggling from the gate. Nobody wants that, especially at that high level where all eyes on it. Who wants to go into a position that's already underfunded? You're set up to fail. So, I mean, like, I was thinking subcommittee, I'm just kind of like spitballing a little bit, but making sure as a committee, but even if it's a subcommittee, making sure that we're definitely watching all of that, making sure that, when this person, whoever comes into this role or whatever happens, we already have all those things, because we do have an opportunity now to make sure that those things are, at least addressed. And if they're not going to give us more money, then we need to be looking at, okay, so how do you make sure that it's done? What is the ways, like, all of our nonprofits that are out there that think outside the box when they're underfunded, but they think outside the box? Is that a process? Is that something that we need to be thinking about?
So I want to tag in a little bit on what Daryl was saying. I think, when we first talked about the visionary or the envision committee, I think we were thinking in terms of like what our next steps would look like with an ombuds. I'm wondering if it makes sense to incorporate what Daryl's talking about in that very same thing. I think it should be from point A to point B, because I think the concerns I have that are similar to Daryl's is I think the intent when they made the broad salary range is they were hoping whatever type of applicants they were looking to compensate according to experience and other things for the position. However, I do agree. I think, one of the things that I remember hearing the former nominee say was the almost $70,000-$80,000 pay increase that she would get. And that causes concern for me, that someone feels that it's okay to step on the backs of the incarcerated community in order to get a pay increase. That doesn't work for me. I think in maybe pushing for there to be a cap on the salary for the office might be a way to go, and then using that same money to actually go right back into the fund. Because I think if they've managed to put in such a broad salary, that's wiggle room for that money to go right back into the fund to make the office work. But I don't disagree with Daryl that when people set up an office with such little money, it is with the very broad understanding or very public understanding that they do not intend for this office to succeed. They consider it a sham of an office. And that's what it would kind of look like for somebody like myself or anybody if I wasn't on this committee. But I'm still going to go back to the sticking point very much to what Daryl was saying about what this process looks like. I still feel that gray area in this. Maybe people will say that, it was his concession based upon the fact that his nominee didn't make it out of, the House. But I still think that there has to be a very clear, very, very clear line of what is allowed, what's not allowed, and examples of what this looks like. Because I think where we sit now as a committee is that our hands are tied and we are yet again going back through the same process, allowing him to, even if he is able to appoint an interim person, how do we know for a fact that this person does become permanent? A lot of the things that we thought wouldn't happen this session did happen. That doesn't work for me. I think my concerns is that we need things in much more clear understanding with clearer language that allows us to know, what the parameters are if this is what's going to happen, because we've already seen a worst case scenario happen. We're looking to avoid that happening a second time, as well as not having this situation where he can spitball a whole different nominee into this isn't, we've already, it's been almost 2 years since we've started this process before we even started meeting and doing the interviews. The PROTECT Act came and went. I think my impatience is the fact that we are going down the same road without any guardrails, and whether or not, he has the ability to do what he does. Yes, he is the governor. I absolutely understand that. But I think, this whole law was enacted and the position was created in order to provide an independent person to protect the incarcerated population. And right now, that's not what it looks like. It looks like, again, he gets to do what he feels like it. And we are sitting here with our hands tied with no clear direction to go. And without pushing for that, I think that puts us right back in the same position.
Also, I wanted to say, it's interesting too, and this is something that we can continue to talk about as we go through the process. A lot of times they'll put these salary ranges, and it depends on who gets the low end and the high end. What's the qualifications? I know that my experience has been, you could come through with a whether it's degrees or experience or lived experience and still get the low end of the high salary, right? You know what I mean? So say if it's 120 to 165. How do what's the criteria for the person to get the 165? You know what I mean? And what I've seen and experienced too is that certain people they cap you at at the low end, right? And if it's a person person with lived experience or so, but they also meet the other qualifications, whether education and work experience, they should be what makes them get the high end of that. I don't know, so when we start to talk about clarity and transparency, I don't want it to be some here's a person with lived experience, but they're only going to get the 120. The job advertised for 165, but if it was, I'll just say for the sake of this conversation, attorney so and so, they would have got, not to pick on my attorney friends here, but they would get the 165. You see what I mean? So how do we make sure that, that whoever gets the position, that they get compensated properly, because that tends to happen a lot of times. And it does, let me tell you, it doesn't feel good when it happens.
Yeah, I suspect, obviously there's state compensation and hiring rules. I think it would be my preference for it to be a high salary that whoever gets the office receives, regardless of the background, right? I don't know if that's how it works. I doubt it. I don't know that this office can be treated differently from others unless it's written into the statute.
No, as long as we can explain it though, that's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that, as long as there's a process to everything. So as long as there's a process, so when we can say why, because I don't know about you guys, but we were stuck with a lot of whys and couldn't answer them.
Yeah, well, so that's certainly something we can
What's the
start.
process? What's going on with the process? So I want to be able to, I don't like to be able to say I'm part of something, but can't explain the process and how we got there. And I think that that's important.
I think that is something that, again, we should see how quickly we can act, whether we have to wait for anything. But even if we had to wait to formally open the process, I feel like we can use time to get those answers, Daryl. Because, yeah, there were, as you recall, we were learning things as we went before, and then we had some applicants asking the questions, and we didn't have the answers to those questions. So let's have them all, answered ahead of time so that it can be a more transparent process for applicants. All right, well, let's see. Do you guys want to, those of us who made the time to join now, select a day that tends to work well, and then we can try to start doing a more regular meeting without having to do polls?
Can we do that without the quorum?
I don't think we could select it, but I'm saying we could,
Oh, no, that's cool.
Any days that I think for most of us that this kind of time in the evening is best, or is that?
I think
It works. It's not ideal.
There's no ideal time, right? I mean, I can actually do during the day, but doctors and
Most
stuff,
people-
people
most
with patients, probably can't.
Well, I'm not, as Marisol will tell you, I'm not a typical doctor, although Rena, I think, is more.
That's who I was talking about. No.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think most of us probably have 9 to 5s. That will be a challenge. So it's going to be an evening. But I think, choosing a first Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. or something makes. I'm not saying that's the time, but I'm saying something like that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we should at least start maybe with a month. Yeah, first exactly like that. For me, Tuesdays aren't the best, but if we did
Why wouldn't we do the second Monday of the month? And do we need to have another meeting this month?
I think we probably do this month,
Right.
since
But then we
this
can
meeting
move
didn't
to-
happen. Yeah.
Right. Could we move to the second Monday of, I know that I may be doing some, but I can schedule around that as long as we're out by a certain time or whatever. But for me, things start moving and, we'd like to know. So
so.
I
Can we?
would like to know better than sooner than later.
Why don't we go for May 28th at 5:00, which is right after Memorial Day? Everybody should be back in the office.
Oh, this is for the
That's
next
Tuesday.
meeting.
Is that all right though?
I meant May 27th is what you meant.
No. Well, that's
That would be
that's
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. I didn't think you guys. That's why I said Tuesday for this month, and then maybe at that point we'll have, because you said we
Okay.
have to meet this month in order to be able to kind of tidy things up, and then I think for next month, I think going with what Daryl was saying about having a set day and time. Does the 5:00 work for people, or is it something a little later?
A little later would be easier for me.
Later.
So Mondays are a better day for me. Tuesdays for the summer I cannot, because I have a summer class that meets on Tuesdays. So
Monday later it works. I mean,
Okay.
because I was in transit today, so it would have to be if we're gonna do a 6:00 or whatever.
or like 6:30 to 7:30
I mean, I can do a 7.
Monday.
I can do a
Oh,
7.
okay.
I can do a
7?
7, but I don't want to speak for you guys. I mean, 7 works
That's
for me.
fine with me. Later is better for me
7?
as well.
Perfect. How about then we do the Monday at 7 p.m.
But should we
And
do?
people, normally once we get a process and we got a set time, we'll be respectful of people's time. We won't kill it, but I think we can just throw something in and knock that out real quick.
So why don't we then say for this month we do May 28th at 7?
But, I mean, should we just do the 20th and then stick with the third Thursday going forward?
Okay.
What was that?
Just next Monday. Just try again next Monday, but at 7.
Okay.
And then we can say going forward, third Monday of every month at 7 p.m.
Right. Right. Yep. And then if we need to add something to it, if something we
Yeah, I mean, you can, sure, on a given month, we can change it, but just so, nobody's taken by surprise, and I think it would help some of the folks from the public who like to come to the meetings to have that advance notice as well.
Well, I wanted to also make it available a time that people from the public could actually attend to.
Right.
All right, works for me.
All right.
So-
So we'll send something around to that effect, and we don't have to move to adjourn because we didn't really have a.
So hold on a quick.
Yeah,
I have
sure.
a
That's okay.
couple-
Go ahead.
I want to ask if Kirsten can possibly get this for us for our next meeting. Kirsten, are you able to get us any potential language, the actual language that was being bandied about for the governor about this interim appointment and like who the parties are, getting us that definitive information, as well as like where we are with that, only so we kind of know everybody's on the same page. And then also if we really can't get, I guess, moving on this, but wondering if we can possibly potentially get an answer as to if we have to hold up and if we cannot post already for the position.
Yeah. I can certainly find out. Yeah, I'm happy to ask around and see what I can find by next week. Absolutely.
If there's an interim, I don't understand why the process can't start right away. Like, why couldn't that doesn't in any other position? If there's an intern, the ball should be able to get rolling. We should be able to get the things. I mean, what would we be waiting for? We understand that we couldn't actually do anything, like until whenever the legislation open again. But the process, we should be able to get working on everything like that right away. Like because there's this position, and then the interim. If it was me in a perfect world, I'd like to make sure that we understood what would be the process? How is this interim number one pick? Because that's going to be a question for the people. How did this person get picked? Is it clear that this intern also have to apply, not reapply, but apply for the position when the position opens? There's not going to be some quid pro quo, or if you will, what have you. That person just gets in the position because we don't want the okie doke. And if it is that, let's call it that, and then maybe I'll have something else to do because it's summertime. I'm busy. I got other stuff to do. We're not gonna really be doing this, and I got other stuff to do.
I'll send this around, but Barb Fair had sent the draft language that I guess was not actually enacted, and I'm just opening it now, and I see it says not later than September 1st. So even in this, not that it's binding because it wasn't enacted, but I think it doesn't mean that we have to wait until September 1st. It means we have to do it by September 1st. That's the posting. But it says we should solicit applications not later than September 1st. But I don't think that means we can't do it beforehand.
Okay.
I'll take a closer look at this and send it around to folks.
And then I would love to number one, shout out to Kirsten for keep sending out stuff and trying to keep us all together. The understanding I don't know, I'm not sure about the process of who we need to talk to, tag, if we should be talking to somebody about the money thing. If it is, can we bring them to a meeting, an executive session, and they can tell us the process of how they came up with 400,000, and then we can tell us what the issue is. And I'm sure they know already, but who should we be talking to? Is it one of us? Like we talked about this before, I believe.
Yeah.
Is it one of us? Is it all of us? Can we bring them to this meeting and have that conversation, a realistic conversation of staffing and all that just alone? We all know that, that just can't work. Well, it's a heavy lift already. And we want to make sure that, and then that person can tell us, well, there wasn't enough money here, but we will set aside money for it. We really believe in this process. We believe in this position. And we're moving to make sure that it's well funded for next round or what have you, but at least, and then I think that for people too, our people that pay attention to this, they want to know, anything that I want to be a part of, I want to make sure that they know that we're right here. We're all having this conversation realistic. There's nothing behind the doors. We're not we're not doing that. This is real. We're concerned about the money. We're concerned about the position. We're concerned about who's there. This is a real thing. We're not just, checking a box, if you will.
Yeah, so the two subcommittees we currently have are the visioning committee, which as Marisol said was really more about how we're going to interact with the ombuds, but I think it would be fine to use that existing committee, since we can't create another one right now anyway, to sort of start thinking as well about our process for this summer, and when we can get moving. We could, I think ideally, when we have a full committee, we could establish probably a governance committee that would be just generally, going forward, responsible for the sort of nitty gritty of the application process whenever there's a vacancy, similar to, Daryl, you and I were on that before, or something like that. But we could make it a more standing committee, and that could also, frankly, have as part of its ambit considering whether there are members of the advisory committee who should rotate off if they're not invested, and so but that committee doesn't exist yet. So in the meantime, I think visioning can be thinking about our job now in light of the failure of that nomination. But there is also a funding committee, which is Marisol, Andrew, and Melvin, and Daryl. You can certainly hop on that one as well. And so these subcommittees can be active, today going forward. We don't need to wait for anything, and then the committee as a whole will actually open that process as soon as we can. The next application process. Okay. Well, I echo Daryl's thanks, Kirsten, for trying to get us all together, and we'll try again for next week.
And Marisol, you and I'll email you about trying to start the process of setting up a time for the visioning committee.
All right, and then right now, as it stands, we're looking at the 20th next week at 7, unless we hear something different.
Right.
Yes.
All right, cool. All right.
Okay. So I'll send something on that around right now, and Kirsten, if you can follow up with the actual link, but I'll be a little bit insistent that folks show up.
Mm.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.